Hello again, my little chickadees, and a big welcome to Rock Legends. Sadly, all good things must come to an end, and tonight's the last in the series. But don't despair, we've saved the best rock legends till last. Well, we were legends in our own lunchtime at least. Yes, you've guessed it. They've twisted my arm and I've finally given in. Tonight, the spotlight falls on me and my old mates from Slade. But hold on tight. It's gonna be a rock and roller coaster ride. Here we go.
The attraction to Slade as a kid would be the same as it was for all those glam rock groups. They all looked utterly ridiculous.
When Slade turned up, we all knew we were going to have a laugh.
They were like an army issue band. Big amps, the leads didn't touch the floor, you know, and they just hit it hard.
I don't think there was any grand master plan behind it all, apart from get out there and play to your audience and see how far you can take it. I don't think they were the darlings of the press. They certainly weren't the best looking bunch you've ever seen. No offence, by the way.
I think you'd have to say that the peak of our career the first time around was in 1973. We'd had the 3 records go straight in at #1 on the charts. First time we did it was with Come On Feel the Noise. Straight into #1 the first day of release. No band had ever done that, it was phenomenal. The follow-up record, Squeeze Me Please Me, straight in the charts, #1 first day of release. And the same year, we had Merry Christmas Everybody, went straight in the charts, first day of release.
It was just completely rare then. And when we went down to Top of the Pops, I mean, it was just like those old cowboy films where I always say it was like when, Clint Eastwood walks into the bar and the piano stops playing, and everybody turns around, and that's what it was like. We were in rarefied territory.
Slade came up with their own distinctive way of going on, but they had a very distinctive sound. And they believed it, and they enjoyed it, and the people enjoyed them, and that is the recipe for success.
We were a fabulous live band. I'm not ever going to be modest about saying that. The hit records were always the icing on the cake, but our thing was live. We were stunning.
This is really where it all happened. We lived in Wolverhampton. This town means everything to Slade. Mum and Dad used to bring me up here.
Jenny, John and Sister Susie say that I've been bad.
There used to be a lot of smog and smoke around in those days. In fact, I was at the time of post-war Britain, and it was ration books and, when you really couldn't afford things, when you used to nick bottles of orange off people's steps because you hadn't got any money, Most of it was all centred round here. This is actually where Slade really developed.
So I'd better get going and try to leave it all behind.
Dave and Don were in this band called the In-Betweens, and they were a fantastic group. And they put an advert in the paper for a bass player. And I went along and got the job, which was great because the In-Betweens bass player was fantastic. They came to tell me I got the job, and lo and behold, the rest of the band went with them. They brought Nod. We did have a singer, Johnny, and he left, and we intended to get another singer. We were going to ask Robert Plant, who eventually ended up being in Led Zeppelin. But our roadie, Graham Swinnerton, said, I don't think you need one. Nod can do the singing. So he did.
I mean, they got a lot of flack from their families and that, saying, I don't know what you got him singing for as the main singer. All he does is shout. I mean, it was like, that was the attitude that everybody's parents had about us.
And I've no idea how he sung like that for 25 years from the throat. He shouldn't have any voice whatsoever.
We've been touring for a long time, a lot of months, and we're in America, and Nod lost his voice. So our American agent arranged for him to go and see this voice specialist, see if he can help him out. And now this voice specialist didn't know Nod from Adam. So Nod goes into his surgery and the guy says, okay, give me an idea of how you sing. So Nod did the intro to Get Down and Get With It.
Well, all right, everybody.
And he's like almost shattered the guy's glasses.
Want to see everybody get up off the seat, clap your hands, stamp your feet.
guy said, I'm sorry, if it's singing like that, I can't do a thing for you.
We were all playing against the volume of one another. It was like a huge battle, you know. So Nod was having to scream over all of this, and it's the only way I could think that his voice actually became the raucous sound that we all know. And he ended up with this screaming voice, and I think until we recorded, we didn't really know that he sounded like that, because you couldn't actually hear him on stage.
That's right, that's right. I said, Mama, we're all crazy now.
It was always a four-man band. Each of us had got something to bring to the band, and we always knew that one day we'd make it.
Crazy now.
This is Walsall Town Hall, where we did the first gig together. In fact, it was April Fool's Day. It was the new lineup. That was the four that would become Slade. But it was nice being a four-man group, because the previous group was five. It always looked better when you were four, like the Beatles, you know.
There were other groups locally that entertained the crowds, you know, and did really well and made a lot of money, got record contracts. We worked less because we didn't play top 20 and because we were bloody loud.
We had this thing about walking on stage and hitting them between the eyes right from the off, you know, pinning them to the back wall.
As time went by and our sound changed and our material changed and fashion changed, Chas Chandler saw us, and Chas was just freaked out. And of course I realised who Chas was, that he was the bass player in the Animals, and he'd managed and discovered and produced Jimi Hendrix. And I thought, well, this guy's our ticket to fame. He always thought that we were second only to the Beatles, Chas. Right until the day he died, he thought that we were the greatest.
Well, when we'd signed with Chas Chandler, we'd got to take this step into the big time, and that meant making the general public aware of us. So Chas obviously wanted to get us a PR agent to get us some press and help out really becoming a national name. And so Chas took on a guy who actually was a PR guy for the Rolling Stones, The Who. He went on to do The Police and loads of other acts later on. A guy called Keith Altham.
I took a look at them and thought, they don't look like superstars to me. I had a very kind of hippie sort of image that was quite dated. And I said to Chas, let's turn them all into skinheads. Because there wasn't a skinhead band, you know, at that time, if anybody was doing this. Everybody was still wearing their hair long and looking glamorous.
One venue, we were loud in the van at the end of the night, and about 40 or 50 skinheads came round the corner, obviously out to get us. We all jumped into the van, and because we were always wary of this sort of thing happening, we used to keep a rifle under the seat, the driver's seat of the van. And we had these 50 yobbos coming towards us, and we put the rifle out of the van window, and as soon as they saw it, they all scarpered. But that's how we dealt with things. You had to in those days. Life was very hard on the road, especially rock and roll wise.
From that skinhead thing, we started to grow our hair and develop these funny hairstyles, which especially the one I had, like short fringe, long sides. It came from the skinhead look, really. It wasn't an easy hairstyle to look good in, actually, because it doesn't always show your best features having such a short fringe. But the thing is, I mean, I've always had a face. Chas Chandler said to me, he said my face was my fortune once to me. You know, it's quite funny that, because I didn't know quite what he meant. But I've always had a face, and OK, that's nice, because people come up to me in the street now, you know, and they're 40-odd years of age, and they may be dressed in a smart suit, and they say, thanks for making my youth great.
Dave always wanted this over-the-top look, always, ever since we'd very first formed. That's the sort of character he is. He wanted that image on stage. When he had an outfit made, he would never tell us what it was, and he never let us see him putting it on bit by bit. So whenever we did TV shows, he'd go into the toilet to change, and you'd hear him scurrying about in this toilet, getting all his gear on, all clanking and things that were going on in there. Who knows what goes on in Dave Hill's toilet? No one knows. Anyway, we used to shout, come on, David, reveal.
Dave wants to be noticed at all costs. He'll do anything to get his face in the camera.
one night he turned up at the club in the Bahamas and he'd actually been modelling. Don't ask me how he came about, but he turned up at the gig on the night wearing this dress.
Well, I thought it was a kaftan, actually, but it was a dress.
So he went on stage in this dress on the night. But turning up in the audience that night came a girl wearing exactly the same dress. He'd never let up that. But it was like water off a duck's back to him. He didn't care.
I didn't really like the dressing up. I mean, I like the bright clothes thing, but Dave was taking it to extremes. And one time I walked off a photograph session and I said, I refuse to have my photograph taken with a cockerel.
Ah, fantastic times. If only I could remember them. And I've still got some of that stuff in the wardrobe. In a few minutes, you'll be hearing about our first taste of success and how it was nearly all taken away from us one tragic night. See you in a mo. Hi, and welcome back to Rock Legends and the story of Slade. Now then, we changed our name, we changed our image, several times in fact, but we'd still not made the charts. But they say all good things come to those who wait. And boy, was it worth waiting for.
Get down, get with it! I said I get down, get with it!
We had our first hit, which was Get Down and Get With It. But then the second hit was the first song that Nod and I wrote together. I went over to his house, I got this idea with the violin, and Nod and I had never written before, and we came up with 'Cause I Love You.
I won't laugh at you when you boo-hoo-hoo, 'cause I love you.
It was a big sound, you know, with all this clapping. We used to go in corridors clapping our hands, and that sound on record made it different. There is a spark in all records, that big records have something special, and 'Cause I Love You was very special. And I remember going on the rooftop, on top of Beatties or somewhere, and we were #1 in the charts, and I remember standing there looking up, and the front page of the Express and Star in Wolverhampton. We'd arrived.
The smile you got, and I love you. You make me out a clown, and you put me down. How I love you.
It gave me and Jim so much confidence as writers that we could write #1 records, and then the songs just came flowing then. I mean, we just churned them out from then on.
You sort of start off liking Come On Feel the Noise and Merry Christmas Everybody and all the sort of most famous ones, and then, but you end up your favourite song being How Does It Feel?
How does it feel right at the start?
How Does It Feel was one of the first songs I ever wrote, and it was a really slow, wistful thing, and I personally think it's one of the best things, one of the best records we ever made.
To me, it's, well, and this is just my opinion, everybody at home, before you start sending fucking letters into the news, I think it's as good as Stairway to Heaven. Quite an epic number. You know, I think it's up there with some of the greatest songs that were ever written.
We were all always a rock band. We were always very loud, very raunchy. But the first time we sort of got screamers along, it was shocking for us because we're not the prettiest band around, I'm sure you'll agree.
I don't think Slade was seen as sex symbols ever. These were a football band almost. So the blokes quite liked them as well because they didn't see them as a threat to stealing their girlfriends necessarily. Don't tell Dave Hill that.
Well, this is it, number 23. This is where I lived and this is where it all started. Nod lived in a council house just like this. Don lived in a council house just like this. The only one that didn't was Jim Lee. He was a bit more posh. He lived in a private house. Even when we'd made it, we'd had lots of number ones. In fact, 3 number ones, I think. I was still living here, you know, with Mum and Dad. And it's like there was all these fans and cars turning up to pick us up and press and all the sort of things that were going on. I mean, Dad liked it because he used to sign his autograph.
We used to listen to the neighbour and I, yeah. And we used to say, I don't think that would be a hit.
That was probably Merry Christmas.
The neighbour next door, yes.
I think the problem with success is what happens to the people within bands' egos. We made a pact that we would always be on the lookout for one another's egos getting inflated. We had to allow room for Dave, of course, but we just used to take the mickey out of him blind, and that's what we used to do, just take the piss out of anyone who was out of line, getting a bit too big for the boots. We used to bring one another back down to earth.
I think it all culminated at the end of 1973 when Merry Christmas became such a phenomenal success.
It's Christmas!
It really capped that year off for us. It had been a stupendous year for us. We actually couldn't do any wrong. It was just great. But for all the good things you have, there's always a downside to it all, and the downside came in 1973 when Don Powell had his car crash. We were at the top of the tree, and then it all came crumbling down after one fateful night. It was tragic, really. Even the more tragic at the time was that the doctors only gave Don 24 hours to live. He was taken into hospital after an horrendous car crash in which his girlfriend was killed. At that point, our whole world fell apart.
Apparently I was unconscious for about 5 days. I just remember waking up like shivering, you know, and sort of seeing all these tubes everywhere, and I just panicked. I pulled all the tubes out and just jumped out of the bed, you know, and these nurses grabbed me, pushed me back in the bed, and I said, what's happened? What's happened to me? What's happened? And they said, oh, you've been in a car accident. And I thought we'd been in the group car. I thought the other 3 were lying the same as me somewhere. And then the next thing I remember was seeing the other 3 sitting around the bottom of the bed. And that was even worse for me then, and I started asking questions about the accident. You know, please, someone tell me what's happened, you know, and they explained to me about this car accident, but it's not there. It's nothing. There's nothing. It means nothing to me.
His memory was shot to ribbons. He could sort of remember long term, but he couldn't remember day to day at all. He was having big problems with his memory, which of course was going to affect his drumming. We decided to break him in slowly. The doctor said, best thing you can do is get him playing again right away, because if he doesn't, it'll be like riding a bike. If you ever fall off a bike, the best thing to do is get straight back on it. So we got him in the studio, but he couldn't remember the songs. We'd do a run-through of a new song, and by the end of the song, he'd forgotten it. We'd have to run through it again, and while we were actually putting the track down, I was singing in a booth down the vocal mic and saying, the drum roll comes here he comes now, ba-dubba-da-bum, and then he could do it, ba-dubba-da-bum.
I just felt I was letting them down a lot, you know, certain things. It's strange, they help so much though, the other thing helped me so much. I keep diaries And I used to write down the night before what I had to do the next day. If I had any schedule to do, or meetings or interviews or whatever, it was all written down and where we were going. So when I used to wake up in the morning, it's like as if my brain had been wiped. And then I could read my diary and say, okay, my diary was my gospel, my Bible sort of thing. I remember turning up at the recording studio once a week early because I'd done it all right. You're not here till next week. Right, okay. There's a few things like that, but I mean, I'm used to it now. It makes you appreciate a lot of things. You normally take for granted. It just makes you appreciate a lot of things.
The only market we hadn't really conquered was America.
So we went over there and we just couldn't make a dent. So we decided to come back home and we walked right into the summer of punk. The policy of the punk movement was everything that went before was rubbish and this is the new beginning.
At the beginning of 1980, we'd more or less called it a day. To me, the songs were always good and always strong, and that's why we recorded them, and that's why we put them out as records. I mean, it was a great coup for us when Oasis covered Come On Feel the Noise, because it brought our music, our songs, to a whole new audience.
In conversations I had with Noel, he was a bit of a Slade fan. And we did this session for a little radio station called XFM in London. And DJ said, right, we did the interview, and DJ said, look, go in the library, pick out some records to play. And I went with him, and we're just sort of looking through the records, and in it, there was Slade Greatest Hits. So I just said, no, you've got to play some Slade.
So we put on Come On Feel the Noise, and he said, you should cover that song. And I listened to it, and I said, you're fucking right, actually. We went to record in the key that it was recorded in, and the bit where he screams baby, baby, baby at the top, we got that far, and I had to re-record it completely. I don't know, 2 keys down, because it was just outrageous.
Just at the end of 2002, Wolverhampton University decided to bestow upon us an honorary fellowship. I was a bit suspect about that because all of these poor buggers, they have to climb the mountain of study, and then these old buggers just come and fly in by helicopter and say, sorry, beat you to it, you know. It was nice for Wolverhampton to wake up that we are sons of Wolverhampton.
When I put them on, I think they're the greatest band in the world ever, you know. Same as with the Beatles, you know. Some days I think the Beatles are great, sometimes I think they're scouse shit, you know. But it just depends on what day of the week it is. So, on any given day, they're the best band in the world, aren't they?
I think the main sort of overriding factor of the band was that we were actually able to get on for 25 years, and with all the differences in personality, my shyness, but I was the determined one, and Nod would always be pretty sort of easygoing, and Don was the comedian, and Dave was other. That we could actually travel in a car all squashed together and be falling to sleep on one another, and to live like that for 25 years was some feat.
It was a great life, you know, to go around the world and be paid for it.
Go and buy a house, have a Rolls Royce, and all these things were all part of a dream in a way. A working class bloke does well.
It's opened so many doors, it brought so much to me. It's wonderful.
So there you have it. The truth at last. It was certainly a meander down memory lane for me. Well, that's it, my rock and roll friends. The end of another series of Rock Legends. Hope you've had as much fun as I have. There's still loads more legends out there, and we'll be back another time. Ta-ra for now, and don't forget, keep on rocking!
Don't stop!